you have to deal with, such as domestic abuse, larceny, motor vehicle breaks, warrants, unregistered motor vehicles. The probability of those things happening are high. So you can look at those categories there and see that the things that we respond to and these individual characteristics of the town of North Reading that make North Reading unique amongst even those people in the peer community. I'll get to that in a few moments because we did our own analysis of those peer communities comparing these factors. North Reading is a unique community. We're at an epicenter. We're one of those rare communities that we're at the convergence of Route 128, Route 93, Route 28, Route 62, and Route 125. How does that impact North Reading? Well, it makes it it's an easy drive up the street to get drugs, to go to pawn shops, to find weapons, and so on. It's also the pipeline for people coming from New York or from other parts of the country bringing drugs through. And so we end up seeing this. It has been recognized by the FBI, recognized by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and especially recognized by the DEA. That's why they solicit our department so heavily for support, because of the proximity of our community to being in the epicenter of this kind of activity. Not only that, if you look at it, we're on average, about 8 miles away from Boston, from Lawrence, from Lowell, from Lynn, all those urban areas that create those opportunities for people from North Reading to get themselves in trouble without being politically incorrect. Overtime justification on page 6. Based upon the concept of probable cause, the police are empowered to be judge, jury, and in some instances executioner. That is a unique power vested in police officers that, given certain circumstances, an officer can draw his gun and take somebody's life, and that's an awesome responsibility. The U.S. military does not have that responsibility within the bounds of the United States. They can't do it. It's illegal for the U.S. military to do that within the bounds of the United States. So it sets police departments and law enforcement aside from even our military brothers and sisters in uniform. The police also, by nature of their job, gather volumes and volumes of information during investigations and intelligence gathering. Some of this information is extremely confidential, and if we were loose with our lips, we could destroy people's careers. And that's not a threat, that's just a fact. And it doesn't happen. Our officers have high integrity, they're ethical as heck, and we have very strict policy and procedures and hold our officers accountable by consistent application of our rules. And we got to have that kind of stuff. So how do we achieve that? We achieve it through training. We achieve it by trying to maintain a supervisor on every shift so that they can be there in times of a crisis to ensure that weapons are deployed properly, that our officers are acting in ethical in moral ways, and that we have a proper staffing level to ensure that our officers are providing good service to the community in a safe and an efficient manner. And that's the basic, in a nutshell, justification for overtime. In closing, before we move on to the budget, in recent years, 7 young North Reading residents have died from heroin overdoses. Many more have been in jail, are in jail. Many have been in rehab, and there are currently people in rehab, and probably about 100 people from North Reading are in rehab programs across the state, and that's pretty significant. And it's not old folk; it's kids that are just out of high school. So it's that population group that we're all concerned about. The North Reading Police Department has had a significant positive impact on this tragic problem by aggressively pursuing offenders and gathering intelligence through education programs such as DARE, working with school staff and parents and presenting parent seminars, and working with addicts and their families to find affordable treatment. That's something that most police departments don't do. In fact, our program has been emulated and copied by the Woburn District Court and all the communities that attend that district court. They've taken our program and they've called it the HEAP program, our Heroin Education Awareness Training. And they've went out and received a grant from the state, and they have 10 beds set aside for Woburn Court communities for those kind of families that have first-time young offenders that are drug addicted and they can't get a bed. You know, they're awaiting a bed and there's no place to go. North Reading has used that, availed themselves of that opportunity about 5 times in the last 6 months of young folks taking those beds up to 30 days, awaiting transfer into a more viable treatment program. But the honor was that they looked at our program and adopted our program almost in its entirety. If you do an assessment of how our government in the past has, they've supported drug enforcement through enforcement efforts, through funding enforcement efforts, education, and treatment efforts. However, historically, when things look good, the government pulls the money out. And guess what happens? You know, the problems manifest themselves again, and here we go again. It's a vicious cycle. One doesn't have to go back too long ago to the 1980s when we had a significant drug problem in that era across our country, and the government's put all kinds of money in there, created the Governor's Alliance Against Drug programs throughout the 50 states, who funneled money into the communities to fight that problem. And you're seeing ads, public service announcements on television decrying the use of drugs. And all of a sudden, numbers start to get better, and all that funding dried up. And what I'm asking you folks is not to become part of that problem like our big brothers in Washington, and not to pull back funding from this department, impact our staffing or impact our funding greatly, while we're getting ahead of this curve. It would have tragic results if we're unable to perform the services that we're performing today, and basically somebody's going to die. Who will answer the parents of the next North Reading youth who overdoses and perhaps dies? How will you answer the questions that arise? What could you have done to save my child, to keep him or her out of jail? Who is going to patrol the streets late at night or respond to a late night domestic assault or burglary? These are very real questions. If I'm short-staffed, lose staffing, I will not be able to staff the overnight shifts because most of our activity takes place. So if that burglary takes place, that domestic violence incident takes place, we can't respond. And there is a simple philosophy. It's called reasonable risk versus acceptable casualties. Reasonable risk is how the police operate. Acceptable casualties is how the military operates. The military will look at training, equipment, manpower, and the event, and then they'll make a calculated estimate. Okay, we expect 10% casualties, and they'll go off and do their operation. Police, on the other hand, this has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court, are not mandated to have acceptable casualties. What we have to look at are training, our staffing levels, and our experiences and our equipment. And if we fall short significantly in any one of those areas, we're not mandated by law to respond to a shooting in a school, to a hostage situation inside of a house, or even to a domestic violence incident where somebody is being injured until we reach that threshold that it's a reasonable risk. And I don't want to see that happen in the town of North Reading. But it could become a reality if we don't have sufficient staff, whether it's through filling shifts on overtime or whether it's where there's an attempt to cut our staffing levels as they exist. It's going to create a major problem in our ability to deliver services. And I can entertain any questions on that. We can move into
before you go into the budget numbers, and since you brought it up, and looking at the municipal benchmarking report, and you probably heard, the board's comments associated with the report. So, we're not using it as a stick to beat up on anybody, but rather to try to understand things. You made an interesting comment here regarding your manpower analysis analysis associated with the formula you used for 37, and it comes out to be for 2008, 39.5 officers. The municipal benchmarking report reported that we have 30 total sworn officers. That would include everybody. Is that the number?
We currently have on paper 30 sworn full-time officers.
Right, but we're short.
We're short 2 right now. We have 2 on the books waiting to be appointed.
In comparison to the average of our peer communities, right, that's the 30 complement is 3 above the average, right, which would suggest perhaps, based on this formula, that our peer communities are actually suiting themselves even further.
And I would even question the accuracy of that. If you bear with me 1 minute, there's another document that was handed out.
Yes,
it looks like
we
that.
haven't discussed, right?
And we might as well jump into that at this
Okay.
juncture, because it answers that, it's germane to that question, Bob. Lieutenant Brennan and our 3 detectives conducted a survey of the peer communities over the last several days. And I'll explain what those catches are across the top first. POP is population, FT is full-time, PT is part-time, CD is civilian dispatches, SIV is civilians, administrative assistants, secretaries, bars and stores. I try to put in some of the characteristics that make North Reading unique. High-risk locations, number of arrests, and is it an epicenter, as I had described North Reading as being a few moments ago. What I did was added full-time sworn to civilian dispatches to civilians working for a police department. And I didn't put a column in it, but if you just jot these numbers down, I'll go through them very quickly. Acton has 43 full-time employees. Ashland has 31 full-time employees. Bedford has 41 full-time employees. Canton has 43 plus full-time employees. Foxborough has 45. Hanover has 51. Holliston has 25. Littleton has 29. Linfield has 26. Medfield has 23. Medway has 23 plus. Middleton has 17. Newburyport has 36. Northborough has 26. Norwell has 32. Reading has 52. Southborough has 21. Walpole has 47. Westwood has 39. Wilmington has 63. And North Reading has 31. So when you look at those numbers, we're right at the median, or just perhaps a little bit below. So so that, in my estimation, that throws that the accuracy of that benchmark when it comes to police department as grossly inaccurate. I asked when Greg arranged to have the author of the report come to a department head meeting, I asked him point blank, what kind of information did you use? And he explained that the information provided by the schools is extremely detailed, and that's required by Department of Education. So their accounting information and other information, their spreadsheets are huge. And he said the information that they glean for municipalities comes from Department of Revenue requirements that are not as detailed and as comprehensive, but by virtue of what's required. So that's comparing apples to oranges. Another thing that I noticed in the benchmarking study was that they broke out very nicely revenues received by the schools. For example, they listed their grants, they listed fees received, and so on and so forth. And I asked them, I said, how did you account for the fact that the North Reading Police Department receives about $200,000 in reimbursements per year? No, didn't account for that. And that's our Quinn bill reimbursement and community policing grants and so on and so forth. That's not accounted. It was counted as revenue, but they didn't offset that with the reimbursements coming back. Details had a huge impact. The year they used in North Reading,